The Forgotten Legacy. Captain Valerian Drake stood at the edge of the rusted observation deck, his weathered hands gripping the railing as he gazed out at the mining colony of Novus 7. The failing lights of the settlement flickered against the perpetual twilight, casting long shadows across the dust-covered dwellings. Once, humanity had commanded respect among the stars. Now they were little more than a whispered memory, a cautionary tale told to children. "You're brooding again," came a voice from behind him. Drake didn't turn. He recognized Lieutenant Kira Frost's footsteps, light but purposeful, not brooding, planning. "Same difference with you." Frost moved to stand beside him, her lean frame tense with the same restless energy that had defined her since he'd found her fighting in the gladiatorial pits on Tesseract 9. Her hair was cropped close to her skull, practical, with a single streak of blue, her one concession to vanity in a world that offered little room for such luxuries. "The Zoraxian patrol increased again," she reported. "Third time this month, they're getting nervous." Drake almost smiled. Good, let them be nervous. The Zoraxians, with their crystalline exoskeletons and hive-mind military structure, had carved up the mid-rim systems with ruthless efficiency after humanity's decline. Along with the Morkathi collective, massive, six-limbed beings who fashioned themselves as intellectually superior to all other species, they ruled through fear and technological supremacy. "Did Oren's team return?" Drake asked. "Just docked. They found something in the ruins of Outpost Delta." Frost's eyes gleamed with rare excitement. "You need to see this." The command center of their base was housed in the hollowed-out remains of an old mining frigate, buried half a kilometer beneath Novus 7's surface. What it lacked in aesthetics, it made up for in security. Here, 37 humans, all that remained of Drake's initial crew, worked alongside a handful of allied species who had found common cause against their oppressors. Technical Officer Oren Voss waited for them, his wiry frame practically vibrating with excitement. His face was smudged with the red dust of the outer tunnels, but his eyes were bright. "Captain," he nodded toward a stack of ancient data cores on the central table. These were sealed in a military-grade vault, pre-fall technology. Drake approached carefully. Humanity's fall hadn't been sudden, no plague or catastrophic war had wiped them out. Instead, it had been a slow decline, a turning inward, fighting amongst themselves until their colonies went dark one by one. Earth itself had become myth, its location lost to time as the great powers of the galaxy erased human achievement from history. "Can you access them?" Drake asked. "Already started," Oren replied, gesturing to the holographic display where lines of code flickered rapidly. "It's military archives, Captain, battle strategies, weapons schematics, fleet deployments from when humanity commanded the stars." The room fell silent. Even the non-humans seemed to hold their breath. "This changes everything," Drake said quietly. Lieutenant Frost stepped forward. "It gives us options, certainly." Her tactical mind was already working. "The Zoraxians have been using the same patrol routes for months. Arrogance makes them predictable." "What are you suggesting?" Drake asked, though he already knew. Frost had never been one for half measures. "We take one of their ships," she said bluntly. "Not just any patrol vessel, the Obsidian Wing, command ship for this sector." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crew. The Obsidian Wing was a mid-sized cruiser with enough firepower to level half of Novus 7, commanded by Zoraxian Submarshal Kelthrix, known for his particular hatred of what he called evolutionary throwbacks, humans. "With what army?" asked Jason, their security chief, a burly man whose face bore the scars of Morkathi interrogation techniques. "Not with an army," Frost replied. "With this." She pointed to the data cores. "Human battle tactics that haven't been seen in centuries. They won't be prepared for what they don't remember to fear." Drake studied the tactical display showing the Obsidian Wing's projected course. "How many people?" 12, Frost answered immediately. "Small team, maximum mobility. We use the mining pods, they're basically invisible to modern scanners. Too primitive to register as a threat." Drake looked around the room at the faces watching him, human and alien alike, waiting for his decision. They had survived this long by being cautious, by hiding in the shadows. But survival wasn't enough anymore. "We move in 3 days," he announced. "Frost, select your team." The ambush point was perfect, an asteroid field dense enough to mask their approach but navigable with skilled pilots. The mining pods, little more than pressurized metal canisters with maneuvering thrusters, drifted silently among the rocks, powered down to minimal life support. Inside the lead pod, Drake checked his antiquated pulse rifle one last time. Beside him, Frost monitored the obsidian wing's approach on a handheld scanner. 2 minutes, she whispered unnecessarily. The tension in the pod was thick enough to cut with a blade. The Xeraxian cruiser emerged from hyperspace exactly on schedule, its sleek obsidian hull gleaming against the backdrop of stars. It moved with the arrogant confidence of a predator that had forgotten what it meant to be prey. Now, Drake ordered into his comms. The mining pods surged forward, thrusters flaring to life. They weren't built for speed, but they didn't need to be. Surprise was their weapon. Before the Xeraxian sensors could register the threat, the pods had attached themselves to the cruiser's hull like parasites. Drake's cutting torch made short work of the hull plating, designed to withstand energy weapons, not simple mechanical intrusion. They breached in 3 separate locations, creating chaos as alarms blared throughout the ship. The Xeraxian crew reacted with the disciplined response of a hive-mind military, precise, coordinated, but utterly unprepared for the savagery of Drake's assault. Humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't follow predictable patterns or adhere to expected rules of engagement. They fought like cornered animals, with desperation, cunning, and a willingness to take losses that horrified more calculating species. Drake and Frost cut their way toward the bridge, moving in the asymmetrical assault pattern outlined in the ancient military archives. 2 steps forward, strike, retreat, flank, strike again, never where the enemy expected. The Xeraxian security teams fell before they could adapt. Engineering secured, came Oren's voice over the comm. Their systems are locked down. Weapons control is ours, reported Jason moments later. Drake and Frost reached the bridge doors as they sealed shut. A simple barrier, meant to delay rather than stop them. Frost planted breaching charges while Drake covered her, firing precise bursts at any movement in the adjoining corridor. The doors blew inward with a concussive force that sent shrapnel flying across the bridge. Through the smoke, Drake and his team stormed in, weapons raised. Submarshal Kelthrick stood at the command platform, his crystalline exoskeleton glinting under the emergency lights. Unlike his soldiers whose faceted eyes showed only insectoid blankness, Kelthrick's features contorted with something close to emotion, disbelief perhaps, or outrage. Humans, he hissed, the translator in his throat collar giving the word a contemptuous inflection. You dare. Drake approached slowly, rifle trained on the Xeraxian commander's head. You forgot about us, that was your mistake. Forgotten vermin are still vermin, Kelthrick replied. Kill me if you must, the Empire will send others. I'm counting on it, Drake said. He nodded to Frost, who slammed the butt of her rifle into the Xeraxian's head, shattering one of his secondary eye clusters. The commander collapsed with a guttural cry. Secure him, Drake ordered, then turned to the communications array. Oren, are we patched in? To every frequency in the sector, came the reply, just like you wanted. Drake took a deep breath and keyed the transmitter. To all who hear this message, remember us. For too long, humanity has been forgotten, erased from history by those who feared what we might become again. That ends today. He paused, letting his words sink in across 1,000 worlds. We have taken the Obsidian Wing. Submarshal Kelthrick is our prisoner. To the Xeraxian Empire and the Morkathi Collective, consider this your warning. Humanity is awake, and we remember everything. He closed the transmission and turned to find Frost watching him, a rare smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Dramatic, she said. Necessary, Drake corrected. Fear is a weapon, and it's time they remembered what it feels like. On the view screen, the stars stretched endlessly before them, systems and worlds where the name human had become little more than a footnote in historical archives. But not for long. As the captured cruiser's engines hummed to life under Oren's command, Drake felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just for survival, but for something more. Restoration, justice, a reckoning. Where to, Captain? Frost asked, already knowing the answer. Drake looked at the star chart, at the scattered points of light where dormant human colonies might still exist, waiting for a signal, for a reason to believe again. Everywhere, he said, we've got a galaxy to wake up, rising tide. 3 months after the capture of the Obsidian Wing, the galaxy was ablaze with whispers. Captain Valerian Drake stood on the bridge of what was now called the Reclamation, its once pristine Xeraxian control panels now retrofitted with human interfaces and adorned with the banner of their growing movement, a phoenix rising from planetary ashes. Incoming transmission from Outpost Epsilon, announced Communications Officer Lyra Wexler, her fingers dancing across the console. Once a renowned singer in the pleasure domes of the Morcathy Collective, she had escaped during a raid 6 weeks ago and pledged herself to Drake's cause. They've secured the mining facility. 53 recruits, Captain 32 human. Drake nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. Each day brought more survivors out of hiding, more allies, more ships. The broadcast from the Obsidian Wing had been a spark igniting dormant embers across the stars. The Xeraxians have increased security around Nexus Station, Lieutenant Frost reported, studying tactical displays with her characteristic intensity. They've stationed 3 cruisers in defensive formation. Good, said a new voice from the science station. Predictable response pattern exactly as I calculated. Rylek, their newest and most unusual ally, rose from his workstation. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with his secondary limbs folded against his torso, the Morcathy scientist cut an imposing figure. The translucent membranes covering his 4 eyes flickered rapidly, a sign of excitement in his species. You find our impending deaths exciting, Rylek? Frost asked dryly. I find your species' capacity for strategic chaos fascinating, he corrected. The Morcathy Collective has 17 volumes analyzing human warfare, all obsolete, all wrong. He gestured to the display. They expect conventional tactics, a direct assault or strategic retreat. Drake moved to the galaxy map, where Nexus Station glowed like a baleful eye at the center of 3 major trade routes. The massive communications hub controlled information flow across 12 sectors. Whoever controlled Nexus Station controlled the narrative. What's our status? Drake asked. Fleet strength at 27 vessels, Frost replied. Most are retrofitted mining ships and captured patrol boats, but the Judgment and the Defiance are combat-ready. The Judgment, a Xeraxian destroyer captured in the Battle of Cygnus Drift 2 weeks ago. The Defiance, a smuggler's cruiser piloted by Captain Nix Valen, one of the first to answer Drake's call. Not much against 3 Xeraxian cruisers, but Drake had learned long ago that numbers rarely told the whole story. And our secret weapon? He asked, turning to Orin, who grinned back at him. Ready to deploy, Rylek's modifications worked perfectly. Drake studied the faces around him, human and alien alike, united by a common purpose. It was more than he'd dared hope for when they'd first captured the Obsidian Wing. We move in 6 hours, he announced. Prepare the fleet. As their small armada dropped out of hyperspace, Nexus Station loomed before them, a massive wheel-shaped structure ringed with docking ports and communication arrays. The 3 Xeraxian cruisers moved to intercept immediately, their weapons systems powering up. They're hailing us, Lyra reported. Ignore it, Drake ordered. Deploy the drones. From the hangar bays of the Reclamation, dozens of small, unmanned craft launched into space. Built from salvaged parts and programmed with attack patterns recovered from the ancient military archives, they swarmed toward the Xeraxian vessels in an erratic, unpredictable dance. What are those? Asked Nix Valen over the comm, her voice tense with concern. The captain of the Defiance had never seen this particular strategy. History, Drake replied simply. The Xeraxian cruisers opened fire, their energy weapons slicing through vacuum and largely missing the small, agile drones. Designed to confuse and distract, the drones didn't need to cause damage, they only needed to occupy attention. Phase 2, Drake ordered. The Judgment and Defiance broke formation, accelerating toward Nexus Station while the Reclamation hung back, appearing to coordinate the drone assault. Standard doctrine would expect the flagship to remain protected, another expectation Drake intended to shatter. Boarding teams ready, Frost reported. Drake nodded. Take us in. The Reclamation surged forward, engines burning hot as it plunged straight toward the largest Xeraxian cruiser. At the last moment, it veered away, grazing the enemy vessel's shields close enough to cause localized failure, precisely where a dozen boarding pods waited to attach. Impact in 3, 2, 1, Frost counted down. The pods latched onto the Xeraxian cruiser like parasites, cutting tools already boring through the hull. Drake felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the clarity that came with action after planning. Captain, Lyra called out suddenly. New contacts, multiple signatures dropping out of hyperspace. Drake's blood ran cold. Xeraxian reinforcements. No, she replied, confusion evident in her voice. There, Morcathy, 6 vessels, heavy cruiser classification. Rylek's membranes fluttered in alarm. The collective must have been monitoring Zoraxian communications. This is unexpected. Drake's mind raced. Their plan had accounted for Zoraxian response patterns, not Morkathi intervention. The two powers rarely cooperated, preferring to maintain separate spheres of influence. Options, he asked tersely. Retreat, Frost said immediately. We can't handle both fleets. We won't get another chance at Nexus Station, Orin countered. Drake studied the tactical display, watching as the Morkathi vessels deployed in a standard hemisphere formation, blocking their escape vector. Something about their positioning nagged at him. They're not attacking, he realized aloud. They're containing us. Rylek moved beside him, all four eyes focused on the display. Correct. Standard Morkathi doctrine when confronted with an unknown tactical situation. Observe, analyze, then eliminate. We need to give them something unexpected to analyze, Drake decided. Orin, deploy the EMP warheads, all of them. Orin's eyes widened. Captain, that'll knock out our systems too. For 90 seconds, Drake nodded. Less if you reroute power through the secondary grid like we practiced. Understanding dawned on Orin's face, like the Battle of Proxima Centauri from the archives. Exactly, Drake confirmed. Lieutenant Frost, coordinate with the boarding teams. The moment we go dark, they hit the Zoraxian command center. Rylek, I need you to broadcast a message to your people in Morkathi encryption patterns. Rylek hesitated. What message? The truth, Drake said, about why you defected, about what the collective has been hiding from its own people. The Morkathi scientist was silent for a long moment, secondary limbs twitching slightly. That would be treason, he said finally. That would be revolution, Drake corrected. Isn't that why you joined us? Before Rylek could answer, the ship shuddered as Zoraxian fire found its mark. Shields at 60%, Lyra called out. Make your choice, Rylek, Drake pressed. Now. The Morkathi's membranes fluttered once more, then stilled with resolution. I will prepare the message. Drake turned back to the tactical display. Orin, EMP countdown, mark it at 30 seconds. Marked, Orin confirmed. All vessels, this is Drake, he said into the fleet comm. Prepare for Operation Phoenix, 30 seconds to blackout. As the countdown reached 0, Drake felt an odd sense of calm. This moment, suspended between failure and triumph, was where humanity had always found its greatest strength. Not in domination or technological superiority, but in the willingness to leap without certainty. The EMP devices detonated, washing across the battlefield in invisible waves. Ship after ship went dark, Zoraxian, Morkathi, and human alike. In the sudden silence, with only emergency lighting casting red shadows across the bridge, Drake gave his final order. Now. 2 hours later, Drake stood in the central communication hub of Nexus Station, surrounded by the aftermath of their impossible victory. The Zoraxian cruisers floated dead in space, their command crews captured or neutralized. 4 of the 6 Morkathi vessels had withdrawn after receiving Rylek's transmission, their rigid hierarchy thrown into confusion by revelations of corruption within the collective's highest ranks. Lieutenant Frost approached, her face smudged with grime but eyes bright with triumph. Nexus Station is secure, Captain. We're broadcasting on all frequencies. Drake nodded. And the losses? Her expression sobered. We lost the Defiance. Captain Valen managed to evacuate most of her crew, but... Drake closed his eyes briefly. Every victory had its price. Nyx Valen had been a good captain, a true believer in their cause. The station's archives are a goldmine, Orin reported, joining them. Classified communications between the Zoraxians and Morkathi, star charts of forgotten sectors, and this, he held up a data core. Coordinates for Earth, Captain, our homeworld, they knew all along. A hush fell over those within earshot. Earth, the mythical birthplace of humanity, long thought lost or destroyed. Captain, Lyra called urgently from her station. We're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Human colonies, hidden outposts, resistance cells, they're all responding to our broadcast. On the main view screen, signal after signal appeared, blinking into existence like stars emerging at dusk. Each light represented hope, human survivors who had endured in secret, waiting for this moment. They're calling it the Alliance of the Forgotten, Lyra added. It's not just humans either. Species that have been exploited by the great powers are pledging support. Drake moved to the command platform, once occupied by a Xeraxian overseer, now the center of something new, something that hadn't existed in generations. A united front against oppression, with humanity no longer footnotes in history but leaders of a movement that threatened to reshape the galaxy. He opened a channel to all listening systems. This is Captain Valerian Drake of the Human Resistance. Today, we have reclaimed Nexus Station, but this is only the beginning. For centuries, the Xeraxian Empire and Morkathi Collective have ruled through fear and division. They erased our history, scattered our people, and tried to make us forget who we were. He paused, looking around at the diverse faces now watching him, human and alien alike, united in purpose. But we remembered, and now the galaxy will remember too. To those who have oppressed the weak, exploited the vulnerable, and ruled through cruelty, your time is ending. To those who have suffered, who have been forgotten, join us. The Alliance of the Forgotten welcomes all who seek freedom. Drake's voice hardened as he delivered his final words. To the ruling councils of the Xeraxian Empire and the Morkathi Collective, you have one standard week to acknowledge the sovereignty of all Alliance territories and withdraw your military presence. If you refuse, what happened at Nexus Station will be only the first step of our response. We do not seek vengeance but justice. We do not want war, but we will not accept tyranny. He closed the transmission and turned to face his crew. Will they listen? Frost asked quietly. Drake looked back at the view screen, where signals continued to appear, a galaxy awakening to possibility. It doesn't matter, he answered. Either way, everything changes now. Rylak approached, his tall form casting a long shadow. My people have a saying, history is written by those who survive to tell it. For too long, others have written humanity's story. Now you reclaim your pen. Drake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the exhilaration of possibility in equal measure. Across the stars, humans were emerging from hiding, remembering their strength, their resilience, their capacity for both destruction and creation. What comes next will not be easy, he acknowledged. Revolution never is. No, Frost agreed, a rare smile touching her lips, but it will be remembered. As the Alliance fleet regrouped around Nexus Station, Drake looked out at the stars, each one a potential battlefield, sanctuary, or home. Humanity had fallen once, turned inward and forgotten who they were. Now they had a second chance, not just to reclaim their place among the stars, but to forge something better than what had come before. The galaxy had forgotten to fear humans. Now they would learn to respect them instead. A new dawn was breaking across the stars, and this time humanity would not fade into twilight.